because the Amish, it's like a big sin. When we run away, they think that we're going to go to hell. And that guilt weighed on me so heavy that it was overwhelming and hard to think about anything else sometimes, because that's all I could think about is how I had sinned. I was born in central Michigan. I grew up in one of the strictest Amish communities there is, and I have 7 brothers and 4 sisters. So I come from a big family.
It must have been a very noisy household.
It was. We had a big family, but everyone had their place of work to do, and my favorite time was always mealtime because we were always together 3 times a day.
What was your understanding of the country you were in and the outside world generally at this point?
When I was little, I always felt like the outside world was dangerous or not welcoming, or it was like I had to stay away from it. But I didn't honestly know much about the outside world because we were so sheltered from it. And I knew there was an outside world, but I was taught to not pay attention to it. Like, for example, my dad, sometimes we would have a sick animal and we would have to call a veterinary. And we had a neighbor that lived just up the road that was English, and we call all the non-Amish people English. So these English neighbors would let my dad use the phone, and sometimes he allowed some of us kids to go with him, but we were always warned not to listen to the radio or look at the TV if it was on, or really look at anything at the house. We would just have to sit in the chair next to the couch and just be quiet. But it was so fascinating. I was like, wow. I would peek around and look with my eyes wandering, but I tried to do it so he didn't notice, because I didn't want to be in trouble to have wandering eyes. But I was fascinated.
So you're always curious, even from a young age?
Absolutely. Even though I knew it was forbidden and I wasn't allowed to have these things, I was still very curious.
And when you were young, were you very close with your family?
I was very close with my family, more so I think my brothers and sisters. I always wanted to be close to my mom and dad, but they were so busy running the farm and the household that I didn't get much time with them separately because there were so many of us. But I always worked out in the fields every chance I got because I wanted to be closer to my dad, and I loved outdoors and nature. And even though that was kind of looked down on, for the girls to go outside, because generally the girls work in the house or in the gardens and help the mom, and the boys work outside. But I was outside every chance I got. It was amazing. I started school when I was 6. I went to 1st grade, and we only went to 8th grade because they believe that after 8th grade it's more important for them to get practical education that will benefit them as an Amish. School was really fun. I always looked forward to going to school. And then summers, I was also looked forward to summers when I didn't have to go to school. But during the summer, we had to work a lot because we had to plant the gardens and put up the hay in the barn, which I loved. But we had to can and preserve all our food, so there was always lots of work in the summer. So when school started at the beginning of September, it was always kind of relieving because I'm like, I get a little break from all the hard work.
And in terms of your education, so you started school at the age of 6, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
Up until 8th grade?
Yeah.
What kind of things were you learning?
Obviously, like I said, in 2nd grade, we had to learn how to read, write, and spell in English. And the other subjects were English, reading, writing, spelling, and math. There was no history or geography or science or anything like that. And then in 5th grade, we also had to learn to read, write, and spell in German. But I already knew how to read it and spell most of it because our prayer books are all in German. So on the Sunday that we didn't have church, my mom and dad, they would make us, as a family, we would sit down and they would make us read from the prayer books so we could learn it, because also in church they preach in German instead of Pennsylvania Dutch. So I could understand it, I could read it and spell some of it, but I had to learn how to write it as well.
And so in the Amish way of life, what are some of the expectations or rules that you have to observe day to day?
Rules that we have to observe like day to day is like the way that we dress. Like I couldn't have hair showing, I couldn't have my cape over my shoulder. The pleats in my apron had to be a certain width, they couldn't be too far apart, and the length of our dresses, and the colors had to be all dark, no pattern. I was very strict about that stuff.
And what religion were you practicing?
It's Christianity.
And how does that tie into, I guess, the Amish community? Is the church kind of the central pillar of it?
I mean, the church is very big. They don't have a central leader. Instead, they have a bishop and the elders, local bishops, and then the elders that kind of keep everything under control and in order. So the women are never like bishops or preachers. Or they don't make these kinds of decisions. It's more the men.
Through your childhood and I guess early teenage years, what was your understanding of sexuality?
My understanding of sexuality. So my parents, nobody ever talked to me about sex and the birds and bees or any of that stuff. But I learned about sex because we had dogs and animals on the farm. So I discovered that's how our dogs would have puppies sometimes, and obviously the cows would have babies and the horses would have colts and stuff. So that's how I learned about sex, but nobody ever talked to us. It was very taboo. I had no idea about the reproductive, like even why I would get a period. I had no idea why or about ovulation or anything. Nobody ever talked to us about that.
Pregnancy, did you understand what that was?
I did not for a long time, and even after I left Amish for a long time, I did not understand what it was. Like my mom and dad, it was crazy because all of a sudden there would be a new baby, and I didn't understand where the baby would come from. And when I would ask my mom and dad, they would say, "Oh, God blessed us with another baby," or "the stork dropped it from the sky." But this was so confusing. It didn't make sense, and I always felt that this can't be true somehow. After I realized what sex was, I still didn't realize how the babies got in my mom's tummy. But eventually when I got older, I noticed that my mom would get a big tummy and then there would be a baby. I didn't know how it got in there or how it would come out. And it was taboo, we couldn't talk about it. And they never told us, "Oh yeah, we're having another baby." It just would show up. Like, that was also very confusing.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
How did you, I guess, first become acquainted with people from the outside world? At what point did that happen?
As an Amish teenager, I started being really rebellious. And when I was almost 17, one day in church, my two cousins came to me, and we were very close in age and very close friends, and they were giggling, and I was like, "What did you do?" And they one of them pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket in her dress, and she's like, she told me that they had gone out with these English boys. And I was like, "Why? What happened?" And they just giggled, and I kind of knew. And she's like, "Here's their number, you can find out for yourself." And then shortly after that, my parents had gone on vacation out of town. So my cousin and I, we planned to sneak out with the boys, and we did. And I never met these guys before. It was so nerve-wracking, but I was so rebellious, and I had to do it. And they came and picked us up, and we were driving around. They had beer, we were smoking cigarettes, and they pulled down this long driveway, and it was February and snowy and cold out. And they stopped the truck, and the one guy got out and asked me if I wanted to come out. And I was like, at that point, I knew that we were gonna have sex. And he took his pants off and put him on the snow and asked me to lay on him. And I was wearing my fancy Sunday underdress and my English panties that I wasn't supposed to have. But I took them off, and I can still just feel the wind. It was so cold. But that's how I lost my virginity, was in the cornfield, or it was like back in the driveway by a cornfield.
And how were you feeling? Did you want to experience that?
I did. I really wanted to experience it, but after it didn't last very long, and afterwards I was like, I felt so excited, but I was like, what's the big deal? It was not that much, I don't know, it was exciting to me, and I wanted to experience it more because I was like, it's fun, but I felt, I don't know, it was my first time, so it was really not, I don't think what I expected, but I also don't really know what I was expecting because nobody ever talked to me about sex. So that day changed everything. After that, I just felt so wild, like this fire that needed to burst out of me. Like I just wanted to go and see the world, and I wanted to do everything that I wasn't supposed to do. And I still at that time didn't know that I was going to run away. I knew I had to wait until I was 17 because that's when you were legally considered an adult in Michigan. And if the kids ran away before then, the parents usually would call the cops and they would be taken to jail or home. That was their choice. So I waited until I was 17.
And so from that experience, I guess, was that a bit of a turning point where things started to, spiral a bit? You started to sneak out a bit more, started to meet people from outside of your community more and more?
Oh yeah, after that point, I always snuck out every chance I got, and there were these 4 boys that lived in a house. They would come and pick us up, and we would go to their house and have sex and watch pornos and country music videos whenever we could. But one night I got caught sneaking out after I was 17, and that was really that's really when I knew for sure that I was going to run away, because at that point I knew that I wanted to keep having fun, but I didn't want to sneak the rest of my life to have freedom. One morning in July, I was picking strawberries by myself, and I'll call him Kevin. He came to buy strawberries, and he was always kind of flirty, but I knew him, but I didn't know him very well, because he would deliver logs to my dad's sawmill, and a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh, I could run away and live with him, and I just blurted it out. I was like, I want to run away and live with you. And he was kind of speechless at first, and he was like, you're crazy, and your parents will hate me. And I said, maybe I'm crazy, and my parents will probably hate you, but I really do want to run away. And he was like, okay, I will see what I can do. I was like, please help me. I need a place to live. And he's like, I'll come back in a week and tell you. And he did. And he said I could stay with his mom if I helped take care of her. She was older and she had a lot of doctor appointments. And it was so nerve-wracking because I still didn't know when I was going to run away. But that night after he told me that I could live with his mom while we were milking cows, I went in the house and I stole my birth certificate from my dad's desk, and I hid it upstairs in my dresser because I knew I needed some form of ID. A week after that, my sisters and I took baked goods and strawberries to our English neighbor's house, and they were outside visiting, and I was like, oh, here's my chance. And I went inside and I dialed up Kevin, and I didn't know about answering machines, but they weren't there. Kevin wasn't there, so I was talking in Amish, but he figured it was me trying to tell him that I wanted to leave. So we go back home. At 11:30, I decided to go up to the attic and get my bag of the things that I was taking with me, which was a t-shirt and shorts and a pair of jeans that I had gotten from a yard sale, and a few things that were special to me, like I had a watch, a wallet was $60. So just like one of those plastic grocery bags. But when I came down, my sister was standing in the hallway, in the doorway of my room. And she was like, are you running away? And I lied. I was like, no, I just couldn't sleep. I had to go get a book, and I'm holding my bag behind me, hoping she doesn't see me. I don't know how she didn't. And she was like, I can't let you leave. Our family will be way too upset. And I was very upset too. I was like, please go to bed and sleep. I will go to sleep too. And then Kevin shows up at the crossroad, and she was like, see, there he is. I knew you were gonna run away. And I just kept denying it. And eventually Kevin left, and I was so mad at her. I was like, why, how could she do this? Spoil my plan that was so hard to make in the first place. And eventually I went to my bed and I laid there pretending to sleep. And she's like standing over me. And I was like, please just go to your bed and sleep. And she finally did. And I was listening to her breathing. And eventually I was like, oh, I think she's sleeping. So I crawled on my hands and knees and I climbed onto the roof and jumped 12 feet to the ground and took off running. I ran across the farm, on the top part of the farm, through the woods. And on the other side of our big woods, there was a lake and people that lived around the lake. And I hid in the woods until 8 o'clock when I saw someone's lights come on. And then I knocked on their door and asked if I could use the phone. And they looked so confused. Why is there an Amish girl here to use the phone? But they let me use their phone. And I called Kevin and Christine. By 11 o'clock, I was at their house. And that's when I was like, wow, I actually ran away. There were so many emotions. It was so overwhelming. And I didn't even really know these people. It was very crazy and interesting at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose you're putting a huge amount of trust in someone you know nothing about.
Yeah, it was very overwhelming and exciting and scary sometimes because I really didn't know. And I didn't really know anything about the outside world. I just knew that I was going to get a job and that I wanted to get my driver's license and so I could have a job and so I could have money to buy a car and a place to live. But that dream didn't last very long because Kevin and Christine were like, you need to learn about the English world if you're going to live in it. And they said they would support me financially until I was 18. But I just had to help take care of his mom. And it was not good. I was there like day after day alone without anything to do. I was very lonely and bored, and I often thought about going back because I was used to being around my family and working all day. And now I was alone day after day. I washed their cars all the time just for something to do because I would be bored and I would cook. But it was very challenging at first, to say the least. Nothing like I thought it might be.
And how were you feeling away from your family? Did you have a sense of guilt about leaving them in that way?
A huge guilt. It was like this heavy weight. Like sometimes it was really hard for me. And Kevin and Christine, they would always tell me that it's okay because the Amish, it's like a big sin when we run away. They think that we're going to go to hell. And that guilt weighed on me so heavy that it was overwhelming and hard to think about anything else sometimes because that's all I could think about is how I had sinned and that there was no hope for me. It was really hard to accept that. But they kept reassuring me that that's not true and that you don't have to be Amish to go to heaven. And eventually I started feeling better about my choice to leave. So I left a note on my dresser that I didn't want to be Amish, that I was running away. But 3 weeks after I left, Kevin gets a call from my dad. And my dad was really upset. He wanted to know where I was. And Kevin said he didn't know where I was. And my dad was like, you either tell me where she is or I'll call the cops. And Kevin's like, she's not here. And then the cops, my dad did call the cops. And the cops came there to see me and to talk to me. And they just wanted to know that I was okay and that I had food to eat and clothes to wear. But after that, and they made me write a letter to my mom and dad to let them know where I was and that I was safe. And shortly after that, one day I was gone with his mom, and when we came home, there were buggy tracks there. And I knew it was my mom and dad, but I was really happy that I wasn't there because I was so sad and lonely and I missed them so much that I didn't know that I would have been strong enough to not go home with them because I know that's what they were there for, to try to get me to go home with them. I was grateful that I was never there when they came. It happened a couple times. We came home and there were buggy tracks. So.
And what was your relationship with Kevin like?
Okay. My relationship with Kevin it actually, that day when I asked him to help me run away, everything changed. Like, he started being flirty with me, and he asked me to go to the barn with him, and he had me give him a blowjob in the barn. And I felt excited, but horrible at the same time. I couldn't believe that I had just done that. After I left, and at this time, I didn't know that he had a wife. I didn't know anything about it. But after I left, our sexual relationship continued, and I didn't know how to say no to him. And also, like, it was kind of like, I felt like I owed him something, but he definitely took advantage of me and my vulnerability. And even after I had my first relationship, like, he still insisted that, after I got my first boyfriend, he still insisted that we had a sexual relationship. And I always felt so guilty because his wife, Christine, was like a mom to me. And she was so kind and thoughtful and helpful. And it was like this awful feeling, this guilt that just piled up, and I just kept like shoving it down. And I never realized until later in life that I had just buried all these things and I never dealt with the trauma. But it was definitely kind of traumatic and not good, because I was so torn, because I wanted a place to live. I wanted to be my own person. I guess I kind of felt trapped in a way, even though I had just left. I was like, I didn't leave to feel like I'm trapped again. But the day after I turned 18, his wife took me to get my driving permit, and I put in applications, and I got hired at Burger King. And that's when I finally really started to feel free.
I'm sorry you went through that. It's, I guess he really did take advantage of your innocence and probably naivety to the world. And
absolutely. And I can't help but look back and often think how different my life might have been after I had left the Amish if he didn't take advantage of me when I was so naive and vulnerable right after leaving the Amish.
Do you think that kind of shaped your view of what love and relationships looked like?
Absolutely. And throughout my life, I had a hard time to have honest relationships. And I always cheated on my partners and just was very rebellious sexually. And I feel like it probably stemmed from all of that, from him taking advantage of me.
What did the next kind of chapter of your life look like?
So before I was 18, my birthday's in May, but that January of that year, some ex-Amish cousins had taken me to Ohio, and I met my first boyfriend there. In August, after I was 18, we moved to Minnesota. And there I was working at a factory, making a little bit over $7 an hour. And then the next March, he broke up with me. And now I was in a new state. I didn't know many people, and I had to get my own apartment. I had a car payment, and it was literally the first time I was alone. And I had this friend, a girlfriend. We're still best friends. She's amazing. I would often call her about my worrying about my financial troubles. And she's like, there's lots of ways to make money. And I was like, what? And she said, you could be a dancer. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, you could be a stripper. I was speechless. I couldn't believe she said that, because I thought strippers were bad people because of how I grew up. And shortly after that, one Friday, she invited me to go out, and she wouldn't tell me where we were going. She's like, have a beer to relax before we went, because I was only 19. And we're driving, and all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, we come to this place. It looked more like a warehouse than anything, but it had a pole that was spinning with a silhouette of a woman. And it was a strip club, and I was furious that she brought me to a place like this. But she's like, don't worry, you don't have to do anything. We can just look and have fun. So I was like, whatever, I'll go in. And we walk in, and there's a naked girl on stage, and she's looking at me and smiling. And I was like, why is she doing that? I was terrified. And I was sitting at the bar, and she's like, I'll be right back. And she comes back. She said she had to go to the restroom. And shortly after that, a guy in a suit comes and introduces himself as the manager. And he says, I hear you need a job. And I was like, absolutely not. I could never do this. And he's like, come with me, I just want to ask you some questions. And I went to his office, and he just asked me how old I was and where I was from. And he's like, if you change your mind, let me know, because I was like, I could never do this. I'm way too shy. And he's like, oh, the guy's like the shy type. You just need some confidence. He's like, I think you would do really well. And I went back and sat at the bar. And shortly after that, 3 girls come and start talking to me. And then they just grab me and take me to the dressing room. I was like, what's happening? And my girlfriend was right behind them. And they all agreed on a hot pink bikini, and they're wrestling the clothes off me and wrestling on the other clothes. And before I knew it, they pushed me through the door onto the stage. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was on stage in a bikini and my little black heels. But I was like, I'm here, I might as well make the most of it. So I walked to the pole and I grabbed a hold of it, and I just tried to move my hips like I saw the girls doing. I'm sure it wasn't very graceful, but I did the best I could. And as all this chaos is going on, I don't even know how I was hearing anything. But I remembered like I had to take my top off at the first song and then be naked on the second song. And at this point, I was like super shy and still had this Amish thing, this feeling of guilt, like I can't show my body, like I can't be prideful. And somehow I did take off all of my clothes, and I was completely naked and vulnerable. But at some point in the first song, my hair fell in front of my face, and it made me feel like I had a shield, like I was invisible. So just throughout, I kept my hair kind of in front of my face, and it made me feel more comfortable. And after it was done, like people were clapping and saying how great I was, and it was so exciting and overwhelming, and like this feeling a feeling of empowerment that I never experienced before in my life. And I loved it, and I had $55. And after that, I was like, I think I could be a dancer here after all. And he's like, you can start tomorrow. I enjoyed performing and doing pole tricks. So I was only there for 4 months, and then I met a guy, and he lived near Grand Rapids, Michigan, so I moved back there with him. But he had a decent job, and I didn't know that he was a drug dealer. And I don't know if he was a drug dealer when we started dating, but eventually he would go to these parties, but he would never let me go to the parties with him. And I'm stubborn and persistent, and I would always get really upset when he went without me. And one night he let me go to the party with him, and all the people are going in and out of the bathroom, and I'm like, why are they all going to the bathroom like that? And he's like, I can't tell you. I don't want to ruin your life. And that made me mad because I was drunk. And finally he gave in. He's like, fine, they're doing coke. And I had heard of coke, but I really didn't know what it was or the extent. And I was so excited. I didn't feel drunk after I did a line. And pretty soon that guy, the drug dealer guy, we broke up. And then I started seeing another guy, but we were just kind of friends, but we did a lot of coke together. And one night there wasn't any coke, and we went in my truck in downtown, and there was a bunch of people, and we stopped, and he asked if they had anything, and the one girl was like, yeah. And he let her come in my truck, and she said she had rock. I didn't know what a rock was, but it was crack. She opens the drawer and pulls out a pipe, and I was like, what's the pipe for? And she just smacked my friend across the face. She's like, what, you're gonna ruin this young girl's life? And he was like, she's a big girl, she can make her own decisions, but that girl was so mad at him. And she tried not to let me smoke, but I thought, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And after that, it was horrible because I got very addicted, and that was all I could think about. And I stopped going to work, I stopped going to college, and I just was a crackhead. Like, it was terrible. And I lost my apartment with most of my belongings. And for a while, for actually quite a long time, I was just sleeping on people's couches or in hotels. If I had money, I would sell myself to get money. And it was not a good way to live. I was so depressed, And I just wanted to end it all. I thought there was no hope or future for me. And I was looking through my bag of a few belongings that I had, and this number falls out of this little book that I brought with me when I was Amish. And it was of a client that I saw sometimes, but I hadn't seen him in quite some time, and he was an older gentleman. And I called him, and he was like, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to Vegas next week." And I was like, "I can't go, I don't have any money." And he said, "Don't worry, I got you." He's like, "Come on, we'll go to Vegas." And after a week, he's like, "I think you're having too much fun. Are you ready to go home?" And I was like, "No." So we stayed another week. But when I was there, I felt like I was a human again. I didn't want to smoke crack. I went back to Michigan, and 2 weeks later, I moved to Las Vegas with $200 and 2 suitcases. That's all the things I had to my name. And 10 days after I was there, I started dancing at Spearmint Rhino. I was there for a long time. I felt like that was my home. So I was in Vegas for 6.5 years, and then I moved to LA. Then I decided that I wanted to go to college because I was doing online classes in Las Vegas at a community college, and I found a college called Kaplan College in North Hollywood as well, and they had a program that was for 1 year I could get my medical assistant, phlebotomy, and x-ray technician license. I did really well, and I graduated, and right out of college I was a phlebotomist for 3 years. That's how I was able to make ends meet. I was determined to support myself and not let anyone else take care of me. We have a beautiful daughter. She's amazing. She just turned 4. She's a little miracle and so amazing, and our life is pretty awesome. And last summer we bought a property in Michigan that's close to my family because I feel like I don't want to be Amish, but I want to be close to my roots. I feel like it's been calling me. My daughter loves to be around Amish, and I think that it's important for her to learn or to be around and just to know where I came from. And I try to teach her good values. But I don't, if she wants to be Amish, of course I would let her. I'm sure they would accept her possibly, but I raise her very different than from what I was raised. So.
Congratulations, I'm sure you're an incredible mum to her.
Thank you. I love her so much. She's having a really hard time because I'm not there with her, but I'll be there soon enough.
And you have a relationship now with your family.
I do have a relationship with my family. I go visit them once a year. And when I go to Iowa, my visits are much different. On the last day, my mom was like, ''Maybe you could just cut your trips a little bit shorter because some of your siblings don't like that you're here so much." And I can't imagine telling my daughter that she can't come visit me as long as she wants. I think my mom and dad, they feel like I influence my nieces and nephews, or they're worried that I will. But I am always very respectful and try not to influence them because I am not trying to drag them. It's their choice.
Do you feel like you finally have the freedom that you were searching for when you left all those years ago?
Absolutely. I finally have found the peace and the freedom that I went searching for over 27 years ago. And it took me a really long time to figure life out, but I'm here and I'm really grateful for my life now.
Congratulations, it's amazing.
Thank you.
I guess through all those years, of dancing, of moving around, of the different relationships, and I guess, coming to this incredible place where you are now, what's the main thing you've learned about yourself?
That, a couple things, but that I have an addictive personality, but I'm very stubborn and I don't give up. And I always try to have a I will, I can, and I'm able attitude. That gets me to where I am.
It's good advice. Are you grateful for your Amish upbringing?
Absolutely. I'm very grateful because my Amish upbringing gave me such a strong foundation and family-oriented, and I feel like it keeps me grounded.
And what does the future look like for you?
The future is be with my family that I've created and hopefully travel and to keep sharing my story and hopefully inspire others. I've gone through so many hard times, and there were many times when I just wanted to give up, and I felt like there was no hope for me, but I didn't give up, and I always had the choice to change. You just sometimes don't know when to change, but I feel like others, maybe if they hear my story, maybe they can be inspired to not give up. I did not know that there were actresses and actors in movies. I thought that it was real. After I left Amish, when I was with the people that took me in, we were watching a movie, and there was violence, and it freaked me out, and I was like, I can't watch this because those people are dying. And they're like, it's just a movie. And they had to explain to me that this was just, they were acting. It wasn't happening in real life.